So this story begins with me helping my grandmother by painting her house, due to the fact that this lady on a ladder would, at best, result in a broken hip, and at worst, a broken neck. I suppose she could have hired some professional painters, but she happened to live in nowhere, the Dallas and our family has this annoying habit of staying poor, so hiring laborers would be too costly. Some more context: my whole family on my mother's side are Jehovah's Witnesses, or Jehovos, as I like to call them. I'm guessing this happened sometime after the family crossed the Atlantic. This has led to them becoming very strange, but nothing that would warrant serious intervention. For example, they are firm believers in the paranormal, and that invoking God's name can thwart off threats. All in all, after studying my family history, I decided this was a major improvement from our semi-nomadic, gypsy past, which had a tendency to give me the shivers thinking about the strange things that our ancestors did. Pick semi-related. It's the kind of hit poverty you'd see in the Dallas. Arrive at my grandmother's house on a small lot of land in the middle of nowhere. A few houses within eyesight, but the place is isolated. The only noise you heard aside from the noise you made was the neighbor's rooster in the morning. As soon as I get in the door, she tries to sell me on this month's issue of The Watchtower, a church-issued magazine. Yeah, okay grandma, so what parts of the house am I painting? She had just moved into this new house, so she gave me a tour. The first thing I noticed was how basic it was. She wasn't at risk of freezing, but there were patches with no insulation. Instead of paint on many of the walls, there was this ancient, cheap wallpaper that was fading. The whole place gave me this rundown and cheap feel. One bit that weirded me out was how strangely the house was planned out, or how little of it was actually planned out. There were seemingly random doorways and chambers, which was a little unnerving considering that many of these rooms served little obvious purpose. The house was a medium size, which was large considering it was only housing my grandmother and her 12-year-old Shih-Tzu. The creepiest thing about the place was all the abandoned shit everywhere. Books, clothes, rusty tools, kitchenware, children's toys, etc. Apparently her inner gypsy kicked in and decided all this leftover, worthless trash was acceptable. That or she needed a cheap place, and when the landowner said as is, they really meant as is. It becomes apparent that this trip to paint her house may extend a few days, so I can make her home somewhat respectable and habitable. Decide that I'll get started on the place first thing in the morning, seeing as I had arrived at about 8:30 and it was now nearly 10 p.m. So we eat dinner in the living room, and I get set up on the couch. About 30 minutes into trying to sleep, I'm ripped from my trance by the sound of footsteps down the hallway. Grandma. No response. I don't know what's going on, but I feel anxious, so I reach down to the floor and pull my pocket knife out of my shoe, as if that would be my lifeline. Something about this place just gives me bad vibes. While I'm fumbling around on the ground for my knife, I can hear some items being shuffled about in the impenetrable blackness down the hallway. I freeze. The fact that I can't see whatever this is causes me to get increasingly nervous, and I try to hold my breath. I know that if it starts coming towards me, I'll be able to see it coming by the bluish-gray moonlight cast across the hallway in a slanted square shape. In the silence that follows, I can hear my grandmother snoring loudly down the hallway. Nothing happens for some time. Whatever it was didn't sound particularly threatening, just unexpected. As I attempt to go back to sleep, I can hear something softly pattering about in the attic, which starts to feel less threatening over time, and I eventually drift off. The next morning I ask my grandmother if she has a rodent problem, seeing as this house was anything but modern and critters could easily get in. No rats or raccoons, she says. That's interesting. We hear the crackling of her gravel driveway, and somebody in an 80s Chevy square body truck stops outside the house. It's the neighbor. He starts explaining how he heard some weird stuff last night, and he wanted to make sure that I was aware of the property lines. Apparently I upset the balance of this place by causing more than 30 mammals to be occupying the same 1,000 square yards, and now shit's getting funky. Weird, I haven't left the building since I got here. We'll keep an eye out. Apparently the last person to live here was another old lady that died about 10 years ago. At this point, I'm not too worried about anything, so I got about my plan to start painting. This goes on without incident for about 6 hours until I start painting one of the purposeless rooms. The stepladder is facing a wall, and I'm on the top rung painting the corner in between the wall and the ceiling. I'm thinking about some sophomore slut and painting away when I hear something above me that makes my heart sink. It's the kind of sound that is made when somebody makes a single step or puts pressure on one foot on a creaky floorboard, a kind of slow, moaning creaking noise. I have a mini panic attack, ditch the brush and jump off the ladder with my hands up. Goddamn rats. I get a little frustrated that I just shaved 3 months off of my life, after exercising my heart like that over a damned animal. I'm calming down and inspecting the room for anomalies, until I see that there is a trapdoor leading to the attic from this room. Okay. Grandma, could you come in here? Proceed to ask her about the attic and if she has started to store things in here yet, as my cousins moved her in here. Really, I'm just a gigantic pussy and wanted her to be there while I checked it out. What a surprise, more leftover shit up here. Also, other leftover shit in the form of animal feces, confirming my suspicions. She's bringing in boxes for me to lug up here, when I find something very strange. A ring of dead rose petals, some symbols written on the plywood, surrounding some dust/ash and a plain wooden figurine. For some reason, this featureless literal stick figure gave me a strong feeling of dread. What the hell? I started to get this paranoid feeling that I didn't belong there, and that I needed to get the hell out of there. Immediately start telling my grandmother what I found, standing 12 feet above her and speaking through the square hole in the ceiling. Her eyes double in size and she turns white. She starts shouting at me to grab the doll with her handkerchief and bring it downstairs immediately. I got to grab the doll, but the feeling of dread intensifies tenfold. I experience the surreal feeling of torment, in which time slows and I fearfully gaze at the doll before grabbing it. This whole event lasted 5 seconds, but it felt like a minute. I bring the figurine down and head towards the living room. The front door is open and my grandma has clearly entered psycho mode. In the middle of the driveway she's already made a small pile of firewood and lit it with some matches and some kerosene. She shrieks at me to hurry up and throw it in the blaze. We sat there watching it burn and I felt a huge catharsis, like all my worries were alleviated and the threat was gone. As we watched it burn, I looked at the details of the figure. It had no facial features, and the thing was clearly handmade. You could see the chisel marks. About 5 minutes into just standing there watching this thing burn, we hear a loud bang. The front door had slammed shut and bounced open again, about 30 degrees ajar and creeping further. She invites me to come inside and pray with her. I don't fight her on this one. We come in and pray, and she does some sloppy but very serious blessings around the house. Decide to call it an early day, and we play cards, talk, eat dinner, and go to bed. Seriously jolted by what I saw up there, but I'm able to keep cool. The night was the same as last night in the sense that right when I was about to get some sleep I awake to some quiet noises in the darkness. This time my heart is about to jump out of my chest, as I realize this is most likely not just a little raccoon. I'm staring down the hallway again, looking past my feet, waiting for something to step out into the moonlight and reveal itself. I can actually feel it creeping back there. As I start to breathe normally again, I can see something in the light. The most horrifying thing I have ever seen begins a kind of hurried walk towards me. The creature is 5 feet tall and humanoid, with long black hair, I cannot distinguish any features, its skin is as black as the void, aside from white glowing eyes. Before I can move it reaches me, staring me dead in the eyes inches from my face. I scream in terror, I honestly thought I might have just died of fright because I saw nothing. I realized that I was dreaming and that the hallway is completely black. It was a cloudy night. A hallway light is flicked on and my grandmother comes in to check on me. I'm speechless, but I can sense that she knows what happened. I decide to sleep on the floor in my grandmother's room that night like a child, but honestly I have never been more frightened by something I can't see in my entire life. The next few days nothing happened, although I never entered the attic again. My grandmother apparently had some elders come to her home and sanctify it, and she didn't mention anything else happening. She moved out of there about 6 months later, and I haven't been there since. The entity in question is something I have read about on /X about only twice. They all describe it the same way: short, black humanoid that moves quickly. I wish I knew what the hell it was.